I won't say an equal amount, but a large amount of unfortunate interactions with such as the police department, with the police officers, or
My experience as a supervisor, uh, with an all stars, I was in drug units, so I really didn't experience. I have too many interactions with females, but I think when it happens, and I'm just speaking for Atlanta and a couple other metro Atlanta areas, it's more so traffic incidents that mushroom. But I don't, not saying it's not
good.
happening, but statistically in metro Atlanta, it's not going to bear out. It may bear out in other parts of the country, but like I said, in Atlanta, it doesn't, that wouldn't bear out statistically.
Right.
And that's just by the sheer number of arrests versus negative interactions. When there's a complaint uh, with a female against a officer, male or female, it's typically something doing more with courtesy or something of that nature. It's not normally maltreatment.
I think to that regard, with regard to what we see with regard to females being arrested, we see traffic stops that mushroom, like you said. We also see sexual harassment or exploitation occasionally. And a lot of times, what we don't see, unless you go on like YouTube or Google and search for it specifically, is once the arrest has been made and the things that go on actually in the jail or in the prison, the way women are treated is quite brutal. And a lot of times we don't see that. So even in the case where like Sandra Bland, right, where we see the arrest, we don't see the brutality, but then she dies a couple of days later.
Yeah, I remember that Texas.
And so
State
it's like
Trooper.
whatever else happened behind the scenes. A lot of times we might see women get arrested. We don't see the violent brutality that happens to them on the spot. But then they do seem to suffer a great amount of emotional distress, PTSD, and a lot of other things related to the arrest incident that happened either off camera or behind the scenes.
Well, like I said before in other shows, I think a lot of that has to do with what all African Americans carry around, the stress they carry around, and then when they're put into a jail setting, which isn't law enforcement, that's more jailers and sheriffs. But when you look at that, I think it's a stress that comes out with anybody. But when it's an African American, I think it's even greater because of some of the trials and tribulations that we do have to face in America. I think it comes out more when we're arrested, especially a black female.
I think also they're treated more poorly when they're arrested than other uh, demographics on a lot of occasions. I think even our people are often harder on us a lot of times than they are on other demographics. So,
I would strongly disagree with that.
I mean, I'm not an officer, never
You
have
get pulled
been.
over, you get no shade.
You get know what?
No shade at all. Nobody's messing with
And I think also there's a lack of education with regard to what can be expected of
you.
people when they're arrested, right? So, one of the things that I did not find out until I was arrested was that once you're arrested, regardless of guilt or innocence, you're no longer treated like a person. You know what I mean? You're treated as a criminal. From the time they decide to put cuffs on you, you are treated as a criminal. You're treated as a number. So all humanity and humanitarian treatment goes out the door of the window.
Support all people arrested. That's the negative thing about that. Because once you take arrest, you're down
And as a civilian, we're not even innocent. Civilian arrested, you're thinking, well, these obviously treat me as a criminal. You're not going to just assume that I'm guilty. This is a solid version of part of the system. So even addition and a humane for a lot suffer psychologically just from the arrest itself, without even adding on to it the other things that can come with the possibility of being arrested.
I'm not gonna touch him.
Did I already get too deep? Damn.
But it's one of those things, and I guess, being, former law enforcement, it's like, put it nicely, play stupid games and win stupid prizes. That's part of being incarcerated. Now, there's no way to desensitize it. It's part of it, because once you're out of law enforcement's hands, you become a number. You're literally going to be treated like a number, because you are a number. As far as that jail concerns, you're inmate 000-1 until you're out of there, because they have to do head counts, and it's more like you become almost like cattle. You're herded one way. They want to make sure the herd remains calm. So if you're interjecting anything that's going to mess up that calmness, then you're going to be separated and placed in a situation where you can be controlled more. Now, that's not saying it's right, but you got to realize you have maybe on a given shift 35 deputies or jailers guarding 500 or more inmates, so that harsh, stand here, do this, they're not going to debate it with you. It's, move your ass over here. It's not going to be, could you please, I know you want to express yourself, but right now you need to sit your ass in that chair over there, okay? And I think a lot of times what happens with any female, not just African American, it's, if you look at on YouTube, it's an endless number of females, period. They don't typically have the same amount of interactions, and females typically, if they aren't treated harshly, so when it comes to being incarcerated, they're like, oh my God, did you can't talk to me that way. You can't do this. I want to talk to somebody before I sit down. It's not debatable anymore. And I'm not saying it's right, so don't beat me up. I'm just saying it's not debatable anymore, because something occurred that got that person in that situation. That doesn't mean they're guilty, but
right.
For the safety of all the inmates and the safety of the guards, they have to treat everybody the same way to maintain order. If they sit there and have a 411 with everybody that comes through, an intake, guess what? You may be there 2 months. And, you just can't allow that. That's all I got on. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate the feedback, because, I'm just saying, like, I have talked to and witnessed and experienced and dealt with people who have been arrested, in a lot of cases not guilty, perhaps in some cases guilty, but regardless of guilt or innocence, because honestly, a lot of things that people don't know, one thing people don't know is you can be arrested on accusation. Anybody can say that you've done anything, and that could result in your immediate arrest without you having even been present at the scene of that incident. So there's not like a lot of investigation that goes into making arrests. There's an accusation, there's an arrest, and then immediately there's this treatment of you're a criminal. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And to go from completely being blindsided, like I didn't do anything wrong, to now you're being treated as a criminal it's a very harsh shift in perspective. You know what I mean? And when you've grown up in a system where you're not educated that this is what happens, where you're not warned that this is what happens, where you're taught in school a lot of mythology regarding what the police department does and what they're there for and how they're, going to help you and protect and serve, and you know what I mean? The police are your friends. You can trust them.
Officer friendly.
Exactly. So when you grow up with that, thought process and that mentality and that belief, and then you encounter something completely alienated to that, then it's like, wait, what happened to guilty until proven innocent? I didn't even do anything. They didn't even ask me if I was there. You know what I mean? Like, there's all this stuff that's going on in your head of how unfair this system is, which it is. And the police, aren't really like kind of looking at it from that perspective, because like you said, we're just doing our job. We're just doing what we're paid to do. Somebody said you did this. It's not our job to investigate it. It's our job to make the arrest. It's up to your, PI person, your attorney, whoever else you hire to prove your innocence. That's on them. My job is to make sure that I address this issue. You've been accused of this crime, and it's my job to get you in the system. And then once you're in the system, of course, the jailers have their own job, which is, like you said, herd people through like count, make sure the head count is consistent, make sure that there isn't any violence taking place in the building, keep people where they're supposed to be. And I'm not saying that there's necessarily something specifically or intrinsically wrong with that, other than as a people, we are being misled with regard to how the system works until we're caught up in it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
And I feel like as law enforcement or someone, I feel should do something to better educate people, especially people in areas that are highly targeted, as to what happens if you get caught up in this system, how to avoid getting caught up in the system, how to talk to officers so that something that is a routine traffic stop doesn't mushroom into a death or a violent situation. Because that's another thing we're not taught. You know what I mean? Like, you watch.
Sound like something we talked about, ain't
Yeah, exactly. We talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
Off the show and on the show.
and got something planned for that.
Yes, we do.
I think, but you're
And
right.
you can be part of that.
It needs to
You
be
can part of
addressed.
It-
She should be.
that. Yeah, it's definitely.
We'll
you
talk
be-
about that.
Yeah, definitely.
But it definitely needs to be addressed.
It does need to be addressed, and especially with, like, because there are kids that live in certain areas, and they're caught in the middle, is what I like to say. They're sucked into the system because on the one hand they've got family who's on the fringes of legal society, and those family members are enticing them to participate in negative activity, and sometimes using them as a scapegoat because they're like, oh, little homie, you a minor, you know what I mean? It ain't gonna be nothing for you to do this. You could take that juvenile charge, and then you have law enforcement who's like getting clued in as to, okay, they're just trying to put this charge on this kid, but we want the real person, so we're gonna try this kid as an adult. So you got these,
No, the kind of crimes you're talking about, you can't try them as an adult.
It
has to be
depends
one
on
of
the crime.
The deadly sins. It has to be one of the deadly sins to be tried as an adult. That's murder, rape, armed robbery, something of that nature. They're not going to try you as an adult for any victimless crime, meaning drugs or anything like that. They cannot be tried as an adult. It has to be a crime with a victim, a kidnapping, or something heinous.
or
So-
it could be something like home invasion, right?
Well, that's not something like kind of soft there now. Come
I'm
on
just
now.
saying, like,
you like you,
no,
know,
but-
you
but
threw that
okay,
shit out
let's
there like
say
it was shoplifting.
hypothetically.
Then she's like, bam, like,
No, let's say
Hypothetically.
hypothetically. Okay, let's say hypothetically.
Oh
You
my
have
God.
a 15-year-old, right, who's rolling with their 18, 19, 21-year-old cousins, and they decide to do a home invasion. This person might just be in the car. They might be doing it on foot. This is the person that gets caught. They might get caught at 15, but by the time they go to trial, they could be 17. So it's like a lot of there. I mean, you're gonna say that there's not a lot of stuff that's behind, because
No, I was gonna say you got it right on the butt, but there also you got to realize, play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. If you're invading somebody's home for the purpose of a robbery or to take drugs or take their belongings or whatever is there, that's the sanctity of someone's home. If you go in there and do that, I don't care if you're 14, I don't care if you're 20, 21, 30, or 82, you're doing like the most. It's almost like that would be the big crimes to me are murder and rape. But when you invade somebody's home, even to me, burglary should be a deadly crime, because I've had my home when I was living in an apartment. When I was first got on the apartment, my home was burglarized, and that to me, when people have been in your shit, to me that just makes
Violation.
you feel exactly.
It's violation.
So
it almost feels like
if
rape.
it's a home
It really-
invasion
it's
and they're
violence.
throwing guns around and swinging guns around and because see, this is the misconception. It's not TV land. You see a woman with a scar down the center of her face, ask her how she got that. Typically in a home invasion, smacked in the head, and now you got a scar down the center of your face. I mean, that's what I wanted to talk about, and that's a good lead in to what's happening against African Americans and who's perpetrating those crimes, because the very people that we say we want to help get screwed over by that black 10%. That's middle class, athletes, entertainers, comedians, business owners. Exactly, business owners that take this ultra liberal approach when they truly are just as fearful as everybody else about the uncleans. The only people that get screwed over are the African Americans that have to live in those areas, and the uncleans are running around committing the crimes. And everybody, when he's 15, and you see that 15-year-old, and they take the picture from his 8th grade yearbook photo, and he's sitting up there looking like Bambi. You know, you didn't see him when he had that 9 smacking that lady in the head or that gentleman in the head. Or imagine your kids 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 11 to 12, whatever age, when somebody bursts in the home, shooting into the ceiling. Get down, everybody. Where the money at? Where the money at? Come on. So I can't co-sign on that.
No, and that was my point, though, is that these kids are being influenced by people that they love, trust, and care about to do things that they ought not be doing. A lot of times, these kids aren't out there just on their own invading people's homes. In a lot of cases, it's uncle, big cousin who's taking these kids along on the ride and introducing them to some shit that they should never be a part of, and letting them feel like, okay, you can take the rap for it because you're underage. You're not going to get any time, and not realizing that the emotional and psychological impact, regardless of whether it's juvenile or regular jail, that this is going to have on this kid for the rest of their life. So I'm like, how do we reach these kids when they're in elementary school, middle school, before they have those influences, and tell them like what's real, what to really expect from getting caught up in this system versus what they're being told by people who are trying to use them as a way to escape the system themselves.
No, I'm just listening. This is great dialogue.
I mean,
I'm enjoying it. It's great dialogue.
I really agree with you, but I'll be honest with you. Once a child has stepped into that, when it's gotten to the point where it's physical crimes and violent crimes committed against people, he's crossed the line. You know, you got to you throw your hat in the ring, you got to get everything that comes with it. Now, if you can save that kid after he takes his licks, fine. But the reality is, he's made a conscious decision to cross that far. And I'd rather save a kid that's trying to learn, he's in school, he needs a way of breaking free of the poverty threshold that's got a lock around him. That's the kid I want to save. The kid that's gone that far, hey, he got to sit.
Yeah, you got to wonder what led, a lot happened prior to him making that decision.
You got defects, problems.
There's a lot of
This is 29th arrest.
And a burglar?
Spot.
Yeah, he probably knew, because number one.
There's no version.
Number one, it's, now
No virgins.
Yeah, there are some daytime robberies. Some people do break into folks' house during the course of the day, but when you break into somebody's house, you know it. And a lot of times they're in the middle of the night, and they're, where you shouldn't even been out in the first place. So it's unfortunate, but a lot of times like you said, they're not virgins. It's a step to that. It's very few, I think, like I said, home invasion their first time out. That's usually a graduation.
Exactly.
The reason why I brought up home invasion and in this particular scenario is I work in a school, you know that. And some of the things that I encounter in school are kids that are facing these kinds of situations, right? So
The ones with the ankle bracelets?
They don't have ankle bracelets, but I did talk to a girl who was, she was like, my probation officer just came to see me, or my attorney just came to see me, and I'm facing trial for some stuff. She was 17 at the time. This incident happened when she was 15. She was with her boyfriend and some of his friends or whatever. They did a robbery or something, and she was part of it, got picked up. And at the time, she's 15, but by the time they're going to trial, she's 17. She isn't sure if she's going to be tried as an adult or as a child, because it's, years later.
Be tried as a juvenile, not as an adult.
And she at the time she said she wasn't certain or whatever, and I'm just like, what happened that you got caught up in this, And she goes, well, the first time I got arrested I was 13, and I'm just like, holy cow,
no virgins,
13.
That's what I meant by
like
that.
I can't. And so, but the crazy thing was, so there was another girl in the room with us. And she goes, oh, my first arrest, I was 12. And I'm looking at these kids, and I have kids of my own. And I literally cannot imagine my kids being arrested at 12, 13, 14 years old. Like, what is going on in our communities that this is their norm, that they're not even seeing this as something that they should be concerned about, something that's abnormal, something, you know what I mean? Like something to be disheartened or like, I'm pissed off because I'm just like, these are babies in my eyes. You know what I mean?
No, they are.
And for them, like they're comparing battle wounds about like the first time they were arrested, you know? And it's before they even hit puberty. So for me, I'm just like, what can we do to help keep this pattern from repeating? Because I worked in this school for 6-7 years, and I feel like every year I'm seeing the same kids doing the same shit day after day, facing the same issues, the same problems, the same mindset, the same behavior, and nothing's changing. Like, there are going to be those kids that, you know, succeed, that do well, that study, that make it out. They're few and far between. And there are those kids who never show up to class and are constantly walking the hallways trying to find a place to get high. And in the midst of that, you've got kids who are carrying the bag for somebody, who are selling this or that on the side, whose goal in life is to be a trap star, who, you know what I mean, are being arrested at 12 and 13, huh?
Why is that their goal in life? That's the question we have to
well,
ask.
I've asked that too. And more often than not, the answer is, I want money. Because they see money as the end-all, be-all.
But, but who does that? That's our entertainers and our athletes and everybody that co-signs on that, the bling-bling.
I definitely agree that the media pushes that mindset and feeds specifically our children that mindset. Like I feel like in our society, our children feel like the only way out is through some form of excessive amount of money, whether it's through selling drugs.
The only way out of what?
Their lives, of the project, or the housing complex, or the community that.
So it's safe to say that most of those kids who are getting in trouble at that young age are coming from a certain environment. Oh,
most definitely. Yeah. Or certainly communities.
Well, I mean, like when we say, what can we do? I mean, those are I think some of the target problems is how do you infiltrate
those communities.
You know what I mean, with something more positive, you know what I mean, the old POW days, but even bigger than that, when you have, and that's good for police involvement, but just from a community standpoint, you know what I mean, how do you infiltrate these communities with something better than what they have? How do you, whether it be the school system, whether it be playground, I don't know they even have legitimate playgrounds anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Well, they do, but they're covered up with, they take down the basketball goals in the hood. I mean, it's like, and see, this I think, and, this is a little bit on the subject, and I'll run with what you said because it answers it. And my, it's my personal belief and what I've seen in 30 years of law enforcement. We have the black 10%, which you'd be part of, I'd be part of, and Lord be part of.
I'm part of the 10%?
Yeah, you want that black 10% because black 10% is our middle class, our entertainers, the rich, the filthy rich, and the ball players and everybody else that has made it in America. And I think what's happened is we write checks that the poor's ass has to cash. And I think that the answer to your question is why does it happen is basically African-American children are born in the hood. I'm not talking about our children. In the hood, they don't believe in the American dream. They feel disenfranchised. They don't look at it like when you grew up and I grew up in the depths of the low. It's the same way. We were both Army brats, Air Force brat and Army brat. We grew up believing in the American dream. We grew up believing it. We saw it as attainable, easily attainable. We never saw it as something that wasn't going to happen for us. We knew we were going to make it. And that's pretty much my whole family. Now, when you look at inner city kids that are disillusioned and feel disenfranchised, you're seeing generation of generations. The crack babies growing up. The government put crack into our neighborhoods. Crack destroyed any semblance of a family structure in a lot of homes. And now these kids grow up in a situation where they don't see the American dream, and you're asking them to conform to the standards of everybody else, but society as a whole doesn't treat them the same way. They're in a demilitarized zone that's ran by police, because I've been part of Zone 1, which is one of those areas where we go out and patrol, and we're thinking about stopping the crime, keeping crime low. And a lot of times, like you said, people get sucked into it. I really don't care about the Buppy, the 10%er that screws up, gets a DUI, and doesn't like the way you cuffed her. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the kids that are... Exactly, probably. And I'm talking about the African-American youth that at 10 and 12 are put on a wall and patted down because we've had shootings at Washington High, not knocking Washington, but Washington High School, or on kids on the way, and they're all put on the wall and they're patted down and their nuts are grabbed and the hips and the ankles and everything else. And that kid has to go to school thinking, I'm part of the American dream.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's psychological abuse to treat a kid like that. You know what I mean? That's psychological abuse. How is that kid supposed to grow up being treated like that, being looked at like that, being militarized, being policed constantly, and believe anything good is positive for them?
But what I would say to you, and that's what I think 90% of the African American problem is, the black 10%. Because that liberal view that you have, and I love it, but when we voice it and we put it out there, you know who has the right to check? The black kids that want to learn, the black kids that aren't a perp, that aren't gravitating towards crime, the decent kids. They have the right to check, because when you start focusing on why they're being stopped, okay, yeah, is it wrong? I wouldn't say it's wrong. Can it impact those kids? Yes, but the root thing isn't the police. It's not the police. It's a government that allows those kids to grow up in a slum, but yet they can give hundreds of millions of dollars to every African and Asian and every other country, every East European, third world country, India, and every other country, but don't give a shit about African American youth that are born in there. Personally, I don't give a shit about a single country on the continent of Africa until they take care of the black veterans, the black homeless, and the black kids that feel disenfranchised because they're being sucked in. And people want to beat the police officer up for patrolling the demilitarized zone that's quote-unquote not called it, but treated like it, but you're not putting things in these kids' way that can make them think they can win, but you're expecting these kids as a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 7. Hell, your kids make dumb decisions at 17, but the dumb decision your kid made was to take your car or to, hey, I'm going to stay out a little bit late. That's the decision that, because they see the American dream. Those kids jump into the car with their boyfriend to make this quick lick. You know why? Because they want to look like everybody else and not be ridiculed about some shoes that LeBron and other basketball players are selling. And I'm not knocking LeBron, because LeBron does a lot for our communities too, but it's like we got to quit being two-faced. You can't talk black self-help, but in the same thing, you're promoting the very thing that's destroying our communities.
Okay, so you made a comment about the 10% writing a check that the poor can't cash, right?
The ass got cash.
Or you said they have to cash.
They cash it. They have to cash it.
But isn't it more of an issue that they can't cash it? Like, because, I mean, from the perspective of the donations that people have made or are making, or the money that people are trying to put into those communities, that isn't seeming to help those communities. Like, how do you, if you are, like, say, a Jay-Z or a Kanye or a LeBron, and you're putting hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to send it back.
LeBron did it right. LeBron got a black school for black males, and they're doing wonderfully.
That group.
LeBron got it right.
And I'm saying
a lot of other people have it wrong.
And so what is the right way? You know what I mean? Because there are a lot of people who try to give back, who try to put the money in, who try to reach back and help whoever from wherever they came from. And we still, no matter how much money we see going back, we still see the same numbers and groups of people struggling and not seeming to feel any difference.
I mean, I think MJ hit that on the head earlier when he said things about how they're giving money to all these other countries,
That's
but won't.
the government.
But
Yeah.
right, but you know, if you want, that's the only way it's gonna be fixed. Truthfully.
Are we really still depending on our
No,
government
you're no.
to fix our
Well,
issues?
what I'm
Because
saying is
they created the issues. Why would they fix them?
that's the problem. Here lies the problem. You know what I'm saying? Because if you get these athletes and entertainers to put so much money up, you know, I mean, you know, they do book bag drives and shoe drives. All these are hits. Hit here, hit there. You know what I mean?
Feel good story.
Feel good. Feel good.
100,000
stories.
views.
You know what I'm saying? And then what? You know, and then what? You know,
LeBron made a step.
LeBron did a major step. You know, that's how you make a dent
But you
into
see
a.
people don't copying that shit. They ain't
They're
copying
not.
that.
Hey,
They're not copying that.
nor is corporate America. Corporate America should
Exactly.
be jumping all over that and find the next person to back. You know what I mean?
We're the cash cow.
The cash cow. The money's there. The money's there. It's just the concern isn't there. You know what I mean? Like we talked about last week. You know, $50 billion because they said China virus. Just imagine $50 billion going to the black community, going to some of these impoverished
Fixing the
communities.
school.
We know why the
just
concern's not
better
there, though.
education,
So
but
why
get-
are we
you know-
still expecting it? Like, we know why the concern's not there. We know that we are feeding an aspect of the system that they need to keep working. So why are we expecting them to do something
Okay, well,
different?
let's
Because
take-
that's the only
we are
people that
feeding
can.
their prisons. That prison
We-
system is designed. It's a machine that
Exactly.
they use
And
to
we're the
keep us
endless
enslaved.
product.
So why
And-
are we expecting anything from them? Why are we not saying, you know what? Let's not depend on the government. Fuck the government. They're trying to enslave our kids.
So depend on who?
Let's do something different. Why can't we, as the police, instead of arresting, teach? Why can't we
Oh, hell no.
treat? Why can't we help? Why can't we ourselves come together and help our kids to not end up as part of the system instead of putting them in the system?
Who's the we? You can't say the police because the police. I mean, there's a
Yeah,
job.
We're
I mean,
already
that's a-
it's
social
a
workers,
job, but it doesn't have to
caretakers.
be carried out the way it is.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
You're talking about you have anarchy. I mean, you know, a lot of people say, "Oh, we're gonna police our own neighborhoods." So why haven't you been doing that? Why you need permission to police your own neighborhood? It's already be done. If you're gonna police your own neighborhood, then do it. Okay, let's do it.
Because you're.
Let's do it now. We're waiting on. We're waiting on permission. You know what I'm saying? Let's go ahead and police it now. That's the problem. That if I'm an OG on the corner, you know what I mean? If I'm a real true OG on the corner, I'm not gonna allow that 12, 13-year-old to get in that car. I'm like, man, no, leave shorty alone. You know what I mean? You need to go back home. That's policing your neighborhood, but that don't happen. You know what I mean? They see it. These folks in the community, they see it. They know who's doing what. They know it. Why 12, 13-year-olds on the corner? Why they outside at 3 o'clock in the morning? Why?
Because there's nothing for them to do. You just said
You should be in bed at 3 o'clock in the morning.
playgrounds.
But that's the structure, and see, that's why I voted for Obama, and I was so disappointed in that man. The healthcare, he'll be considered one of the greatest presidents ever because socialized medicine is here to stay. They're fighting it, but they know it's here to stay. It's, so he brought us out of that, but he looked out for the LGBT community. He looked out for feminists. But what he didn't say to African Americans was, hey, should get off the pot. We need to police ourselves and improve our communities. Like I said, you're talking very liberal, I might add, beautifully, but liberal as hell.
You're welcome.
Where you're looking past everything that's right there because you know why? Because that's what happens. You have the black 10% that wants to play God. Oh, this is what they need. We should call them. The police are wrong for arresting them. No, the police are saving the African Americans that stay in those neighborhoods from the uncleans.
From the who?
Uncleans.
You keep using this word. I'm not familiar with the term.
I don't use the word nigga. So unclean replaces that. And that's what happens because the best way for African Americans to cleanse our neighborhoods are to start looking at the uncleans as a disease, and we'll call it niggism. And the only cure for that is an education, be it vocational, 4-year college, 2-year college. And if we start looking at it like that, we can change some of the people that have been morphed into uncleans and bring them back to being African Americans because they're preying on their own people. They're not. Well, now they are. That's why Buckhead's getting ready to succeed with their 46% of the Atlanta budget because of the crime that those uncleans are committing. But we need to look at the damage that it does in our own communities. Those poor kids, and I said this example, I said it on like 4 shows, but prior to the pandemic, if you went to the city of Atlanta at 6:30 in the morning, you knew certain streets, main surface streets, you don't go on. You know why? If you get caught behind a school bus and it pulls up on one of these apartment complexes, literally, it'll be 7 buses that are waiting in one apartment complex. That's how many kids live in that apartment complex. But if you go during the day from 5 o'clock to 12 o'clock during the week, or Saturday, Sunday, and you go to those same neighborhoods, kid you not, and I'll give you a ride along. I'll get you a ride along in Zone 1. You will literally see maybe 10 kids the whole time you ride. I'm not talking if they're in a car or with their parent, but just walking the streets or playing. I'll go by every single playground, and you may not even see a kid.
So I used to drive a school bus.
Okay, you know exactly what I'm talking about then.
And I used to drive Stanton Road.
Okay, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
While I was in college, I drove a school bus. I drove for 6 years, Fulton County. Part of the time was M to M, which I moved here from California. Mm-hmm. So it shocked me.
Okay, now that explains your
I know. Everybody does that to me. Whatever. Do not be dismissive just because I'm from California.
Valley girl.
Okay? Oh, my God. But no, I did move here from California, and it shocked me to know that M to M still existed. That there was, I'm like, this is 2000. There's still minority to majority busing in 2000. Sure. Like, do you guys realize we're in a new millennium? And in Georgia, it was still like, not only was it still in existence, it was still necessary. There's still so much segregation in Georgia that if in certain communities you will not see white people, and in other communities you will not see black people.
What you just said is 90% of our problem.
And as soon
Why does it matter if there's no Caucasians in there? We should be able to sustain our own neighborhoods and provide an adequate education in our own neighborhoods. And see what the problem comes in, and we haven't even talked about crime yet, but it's a direct reflection on the crime that occurs. We'll talk about the city of Atlanta, because you have African-American mayors, African-American chiefs until the last Chief Bryant's there now, and he'll do a good job, but Chief Shields is the first non-African-American chief in I don't know how many years, in 30 years. Okay, then you got to go back to the superintendents of the school system have been black, I guess, for the last 30 years. But you have a failing school system. When the standardized test came out in Georgia, the graduating, and this isn't meant to embarrass the girl, but the valedictorian of Mays High School, one of the flagships of Atlanta public school system, failed the standardized test, the valedictorian, when it came out. And what I'm saying is that until we look at the root of that problem, and the root of that problem is we have the black 10% writing checks and living in there, making decisions and saying what should happen from a middle-class point of view in their middle-class neighborhoods, and they want to come and dictate what's happening in an area where African Americans are besieged by uncleans. And the only way to correct that is to make it so those uncleans, like the only cure for niggism, is an education, be it vocational or otherwise, and you set it up for those kids where they can actually perform. And I'll put this to you. If you take the graduating senior, every graduating senior out of Atlanta public school system, and give them a full ride scholarship to a college, how many of them do you think would graduate? And I'm not saying that to be insulting, because Google it. Google the amount, look at the Hope Scholarship, and look at Hope Scholarship. I think it's almost 70-something%. I used to know the figure, but 70-something% of the African-American kids that start the Hope Scholarship don't finish it. That Hope Scholarship, all y'all that do scratch-offs, you're educating Caucasian kids.
Well, you
They're
know
getting
why?
full rights. They're getting full rides to Georgia. Georgia Tech and elsewhere on a Hope Scholarship because their school systems are better and they're capable of graduating.
Well, no, it's not just that. They're dumbing our kids down, and I'm saying that from somebody who's within the school system.
Yeah.
So, like, I have talked to teachers.
No. Hold up. I want to correct you on one thing. When it's a white cop that shoots an African American criminal or non-criminal, we call him out. We say white cop, right? So I want you to call out who's in charge of that school system. By color, please.
I don't know who's in charge of the system. I just know who.
Superintendent. What color is the superintendent?
I don't know the superintendent of Clayton County. I can tell you what county.
Well, I'll
it is.
tell you they're African American. I'll answer
I don't
that for
know.
you. DeKalb
I
County,
don't know the
African American.
superintendent
Fulton County,
personally.
African American.
But I do know that there's a lot of pressure on the teachers for making sure that these kids get a certain percentage on these tests so that they can get certain types of funding and such. And I know that there are a lot of kids that are being passed through the school system, and by the time they get to high school,
which goes back to your original question of how do we fix these problems. There's another one. That's a problem.
And that's
Oh, it's
what,
definitely
that
a
causes
problem.
all the
But what I'm
problems.
saying
That's
is-
the root of all the problems.
That's a problem.
My point is to why it's going towards why they don't finish college or get the Hope Scholarship, because a lot of times they're getting passed through elementary school, through middle school. They get to high school, they don't know basic math. They don't know fractions. They don't know. I asked one kid what's half of 1,000. She's 16. She was like, "How am I supposed to figure that out?" I'm like, "That's basic. Like that. You should know that off the top of your head
Exactly.
at 16. And if you don't know the answer, you should know how to find it." I had one teacher come. We were passing in the library. She was grading a bunch of tests that were Scantron tests, and she told me the highest grade that she got in the class was a 69 on this set of Scantron tests. 69 out of all of her classes is the highest grade. So she made that the A, right? She made 69 the A and graded on a curve, right?
Oh, my
so
God.
everybody who got 60 to 69 got an A.
Wow.
Everybody who got 50
Question.
to 60 or 50 to 59 got a B. Everybody who got 40 to 49 got a C. And anybody who got under 40 failed. And half the class, at least, still failed that
Okay.
test.
Wow.
I'm going to be a mind reader here.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I'm going to be a mind reader. I'm going to ask you the question, but I'm going to
This is
answer.
not
And I'll be
isolated.
100% correct. The population of that school is probably 85% or more black.
Oh, for sure.
Black president, black
Principal.
principal, and I'd venture to say predominantly black staff, and a black superintendent, and a poor African American community. Am I right?
You are, like, you're
A mind reader.
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh
Well, if
my
I could take that
God.
to Vegas,
Are you psychic?
oh
my
you said that
God.
just like a Valley Girl. Yeah.
And we do know that majority of, and it's an unfortunate situation, but when they shut down all the Atlanta, homes, Bankhead, Herndon, Hollywood, and gave out the vouchers, we know where they all 70% of them went to, right?
Oh, yeah, Clayton County.
Clayton County.
Sure. Clayton County.
Clayton County.
South Cobb.
And
that's
that's-
actually what happened, because Clayton County, a lot of us who've been here for a lot of years know, used to be a very white county.
But
And,
they were one of the ones who accepted the vouchers, and that's
Some
where
of the
they.
better school, and one of the better school systems, just like the cab before she opened the SIFT and released them all.
So and the thing about it is, like you were talking about, as far as people giving money back and people speaking on what happens in the communities and the segregation and all of that. And the thing about it is when we black people move into white neighborhoods, the first thing white flight is real. White people get out of those neighborhoods so fast, and they will move to communities where the education system's better, where the housing is cheaper, where there's more of their own. They're getting it for cheap. They're selling it to us for more, and then we're running it down in value. And the real sad part about it is that the education system, the school systems, funding is based on property taxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when the higher paid professionals in our communities make enough money to leave, they go buy properties in white neighborhoods, which adds to the funding of the white schools. And so our kids aren't getting the funding. Our kids, I've seen, because like I said, I drove a school bus and I've also worked in the schools. I've seen schools in North Fulton County where it's $900,000 houses, and South Fulton County where it's $90,000 houses. This building looks identical. The curriculums are different. The availability of extracurricular activities is different. The field trips are different. The sports available are different. In these schools in North Fulton County, these kids are learning how to play golf, tennis, lacrosse. In the South County schools, all they're having is football, basketball, and track, right? The North County, they have swimming. They get to go on vacations, sometimes overnight, sometimes weekend trips out of the country that are sponsored by a parent of a student who goes there. We don't have that kind of thing that goes on in these communities.
Because of black
if you're
flight.
in a
You talked about
$90,000
white
house
flight, black
community,
flight.
these people aren't making barely enough to pay their mortgage, or they're renting, and they can't afford to support, finance, or help 500 kids go on a trip out of town or up to
You've answered your own
to
question.
a nice restaurant.
You're answering your own
No,
question.
I understand the problem. My question is not what is the problem. My question is, how do we fix the problem?
Well, I'm radical, and y'all know I'm very far right. But I'm pro-black and far right. And I'll say this. The solution is to be realistic. We've allowed African Americans, educators, it's almost like a fan club for Deltas and Kappas. They all go, yeah, if you can't get a good job, you go to Atlanta Public School System. If you're a Delta, you'll get a job. And basically what happens, they basically are making money, screwing over the underclass and the African American community.
Good.
And you placate, and I think society as a whole, black society as a whole, wants to placate the uncleans, but we don't care about the unheard voice, and that's the voice of the poor African American. You know, we want to chase every police shooting, and don't get me wrong, they happen. Police brutality exists, but more African American kids are destroyed by substandard school systems who are run by African Americans with black mayors and a black constituents that are ignored into its election time.
Now let me ask you something. Do you feel like that's about the funding though? What is the cause of that?
Ignorance.
No, I don't even think it's ignorance, because those are that black 10%.
No, I think
the
it's
black
making-
10%.
What is it? What?
They've
Black-
made a
you're talking
career.
about
If
the
you
black
look at
10%,
Kilpatrick in Detroit,
It's the 90%
and you look everywhere
that are
else.
voting, and that's ignorance, because they
No,
don't
because
know
what
they're
happens
voting for,
is
what they're voting on, or
every-
what to expect for the people.
Every
that they're
African
voting for.
American leader has to depend on the underclass vote. So they're not going to do any harsh treatment or harsh actions because they got to placate that underclass. If they do what's necessary, what could fix the system real quick is bring back vocational schools. Because if anybody, which I've had to do recently, pay for a plumber, I got a carpenter out there, and I go black when I do that. And the cost is whoa. And if you had, if you push kids,
black people because them niggas don't show up.
no, but I mean, yeah, but that's part of it. But I would rather go black and have that on my conscience doing the right thing than to not go black. And I mean, face it, there's 70-some% of the population. They look out for each other. We need to shop black, build black, but we also need to put people in positions because like the guy that did lay my bricks, black brick mason, he said, I tried to hire my children, they're all college educated. Once he couldn't force them anymore, they didn't want to work it. The cousins are too lazy. And when you go down to the work pool, most of those are addicts. So then the ones you can hire to do that job are either Caucasians or the Hispanics that are in the labor pools or standing outside Home Depot. You train them up, you get them right, boom. But as soon as you train them and he teaches them, guess what they do? They get their own company and start their own company. So what I'm saying is we need to quit letting the 10%, those uppity ass Negroes that run the school systems, the black leaders need to step the fuck up and quit pandering for votes and go ahead, call us out on what our issues are, fix the system, bring back vocational schools, because if you bring back vocational schools and that kid can do something that he can see tangible at the end of a rainbow, you'll have a skill where you'll be getting paid $17, $20 at 21 years old, 18 years old, or go into a system that continuously puts out black kids that can't perform on standardized tests. The system's failed itself, but instead of African Americans calling it out, we want to talk about a police officer that killed somebody, but guess what? He had a goddamn criminal record. Not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong, but what's killing African Americans, and I say it again, is black leadership that continues to let black schools underperform and worried about if they're going to get fucking reelected instead of doing the right thing. And the right thing is to say exactly what you need to say to get the vocational schools in and let that positive current come so those African American kids can start seeing the American dream that 10% sees, that FAMU grad that's in the public school system as a teacher. But all those people recognize the American dream, but they're purposely letting a school system that constantly underperforms, but nobody's correcting it. And I don't care what's happening in Caucasian communities. I'm talking about African American communities. If we don't fix that, the number of black youths that are continuing that commercial jail system, which we don't get that funding other than Jordan, from the commercialized jails, those jails are getting filled by those same African American youth that African American leaders are failing in inner city schools. The crime rates, and we can talk about stats a little bit. The crime stats in Atlanta, if you look at 1999 in Atlanta, there was 99 homicides. 2020, the year of unrest, 159 homicides, with some still open. They can't determine where, but 159. When I left in 2018, July 18th in 2020, there was 70-something homicides. By that year end, there was 150-something. But you had no black leader crawling out. Nobody saying, hey, look, we're killing each other. You look at Chicago year after year. You look at Cleveland. You look at Baltimore. And see, the thing I hate, we're going to have a caller call in, and they're going to say, well, what about the white mass shooters? What about the white mass shooters? Come on. Nobody here black owns a gun, and everybody here, do you own a gun? Question, you own a gun? Do you own a gun? Exactly, she owns a gun. You own a gun.
Of course.
Hello? Why did you purchase a gun? I know you purchased a gun. You were worried about that white guy killing you, weren't you? You were worried about when you leave here counting all that money on the county club, you was worried about that white guy robbing you, right?
I can't say that.
No, just answer that. Yes or no?
No, of course not.
So why did you buy that gun?
You know, I've always had a gun, so that's not really a good question for me. But you know, even before the business, I always had a gun, but for protection.
And if you think you use that gun, if you had to put $1 million bet on something, your whole club on something, if you had to use that gun, do you think you're going to be using it against an African American or a Caucasian?
I mean, I hate to answer that question because we already know the answer.
No, but I want you to answer it.
I mean, I'm unfortunate African American. I mean,
exactly.
that's the.
And so, that's you maybe, but I don't feel like I would have to use my.
Okay, Valley girl.
No, but I'm saying that to say because my interaction with black people and my experiences have been such that I don't feel unprotected.
So basically, the burglary you're talking about, the young lady, they were what color again?
Oh, they were black.
Right. So
in the home invasion.
The home invasion. So I mean, you know.
I mean, black people. People rob their own communities. Let me put it that way. White people rob people.
No, black people rob.
Black people rob.
Black people rob all.
Asian people rob.
I worked Buckhead for years, and you know there were quite a few home invasions, and the rest we made they were very seldom white. Just being honest.
They were seldom white.
Very seldom.
Okay. That's not
Okay,
my point.
okay. I'll help you out on this. Up until I can't speak on any other year, but if you go from 2020 back in Atlanta, how many white perpetrators killed African Americans do you think?
Are we including cops?
But see, now you're putting it. Okay,
just asking.
okay. Include cops. Include cops.
I don't know the statistics. I just want to throw
Just
that
take a guess. We'll just take a guess.
How many white perpetrators killed African Americans?
And we average
Back how many
over
years?
100 homicides a year.
How many going back? How many years?
Going back 10 years.
I would say 50%.
Whites killing blacks.
And you're so fucking wrong. It's disgusting. Try the only one into. There's a white drug dealer that we picked up from Jasper that killed a black and a white guy off of Stewart Avenue, Metropolitan, that stole some drugs and he killed them both. And then there was a one that's publicized, the white guy that killed his black Spelman grad wife, killed her, and they're both wealthy. Other than that, it's all black on black crime. And before the callers start chiming in, I'm not saying this to say, oh, don't worry about no black. No, we do need police reform. But to have black American, African American reform, we need to recognize and go to the root factor. The root factor why African American youth are so bad. The reason why there's a 68 to 70% increase on ag assault and homicides, and the birth rate, 78% of black children are born, or 70-some% of African American children are born in single family households. So I say this to say, until we identify the fact what's going wrong, we can't correct it. And what's going wrong, and I'm not talking about white people, so please don't come in and say white people do it too. What's going to correct us is that we go back to the drawing board, bring back vocational school so these kids can get a foothold in American society, which they have to function in and have a very real skill.
Most vocations, yes, there is vocational education. However, most vocations are something that are passed down from father to son. Like traditionally, when people took on vocations, they did what their parents did or what somebody in the family did. If your dad was a plumber, you became a plumber. If your dad was an electrician, you became an electrician. Like you learned that trade because you kind of grew up in it. So you were already somewhat pre-educated with regard to this trade. And then when it was offered as a vocation, you might have went in it for the certification, but you already knew the trade because that was the trade of your family. You know what I mean? Like and one of the problems is we don't have fathers in these households who have trades that they're passing down to their sons or their children.
So based on that, wouldn't it be awesome to have that still introduction? You don't think? Go ahead.
I'm saying that is true. Two, we're also have a society right now that hyper promotes certain occupations to our youth, such as rapping, sports, things like that, where our kids don't even see things like plumbing and electrician as a viable income. They don't even see that as something they potentially They don't see that as something they potentially want to do because in their mind, there's not any profit in it. There's not any livelihood in it. They don't understand the benefits of it. They don't understand how it's going to provide them the quote-unquote lifestyle that they've seen on TV. So when I talk to these kids, and one of the main questions I ask the majority of the kids that I talk to is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the kids that I talk to, it's almost always, I want to be a rapper. I want to be a drug dealer. I want to be a ball player. I had one kid tell me he wanted to go to jail, and he was only 4. And I was just like, whoa, that broke my heart. I was expecting
meet his daddy.
Superman, Batman, something. He was like, I want to go to jail. And I was like, what? And he said it again. And I was like, is your dad in jail? He was like, yeah. I was like, so you want to see your dad? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, well, baby, your dad doesn't want to be there. Maybe you should strive to be like a lawyer, an attorney, something where you can get your dad out.
That's where you're messing up. That's where you're messing up.
Why is that
That's where you're messing up. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's the issue I have with the black 10%. They're writing and painting a picture on what they would see their kid being brought up by and making it successful. You're talking to a kid that lives in the hood.
Your dad potentially get your dad out of jail.
That's what you're telling
and
me.
he
That's
can
just like telling
be here on the outside with you. He doesn't want to be in there. Be the person that gets him out. Don't be the person
But
trying
you're
to go
blowing
in there
smoke
with
up a
him.
kid's ass.
No, because that is a
You're
possibility.
talking about, no, it's not.
Why not?
That's what's
why
hurting us.
Why are you telling these
That's what's
4-year-old
hurting
kids
us.
they can't be a
That's
lawyer
what's hurting
or an
us.
attorney? That's
you know
not
why?
hurting us.
Because his mom can't spell cat if you spot her the C and the T and his dad's in jail. Okay? That's what the black 10% is fucking over African American youth, because they keep on writing a formula that works for youth that are part of that 10%. When you're black middle class and you've moved, where do you live, Layla? Where do you live? Exactly. Or where Douglasville, or in Henry where I live, or wherever you live. And so my point is simply, exactly. My point is simply this, that we keep on writing checks that are making them hold the check for that liberal ass pie in the sky metrosexual attitude towards.
Why are you telling these kids it's not possible?
Because when your school system is failing and you had black people just about 8 years ago that get caught in a cheating scandal that raped the minds of all those kids.
If you're in a school system where you have to do the curve at 69,
change was possible. Don't tell that kid it's
don't
not
sell him
possible.
a dream. No, you know what'll be good? If you sit that kid down and say, talk to him about vocational schools. Talk to him about the military.
That's not going to help him see his daddy?
He doesn't. Well, at that point, what's going to help him see his daddy is his daddy get out.
But maybe he can have a job when his daddy get out.
Exactly, but you got to look at
something
it realistically.
When dad gets
if
out.
his dad's a criminal.
Realistic? Are you kidding me? I don't believe in realism.
Exactly. You're definitely from the valley.
Wow. That
not in an insulting way. Not in an insulting way.
That sounded
not in an insulting way.
So MJ, and by the way, with the plumbers and stuff you got going, we need some concrete specialist. My man called Michael Kemp, man. Give him a call. He'll be doing some awesome work. But with that being said,
that was a nice plug.
Wasn't that a nice plug? My man Kemp, he's a great follower of the show, man, and a great dude, great kids. But I don't have the name offhand, but concrete specialist.
Hey, hit me up. Go ahead and put it in there. DM me.
Yeah. He do some amazing work. But going to the stats, man. Let's talk some stats now. Now that because we've hit on some great targets.
Okay.
But let's talk about the stats that come from unfortunately some of these other unfortunate circumstances.
There's I think it's 68% increase in homicides in Atlanta from last year to this year. The upward swing. Ag assaults are 70-something% increase. And where it affects African Americans that are living in those communities is now. And see, people don't look at it because all these buppies and yuppies who live outside the city of Atlanta and all that black 10% that live outside. Well, I know both of them kind of somewhat cover you. But when those people are out and they're writing decisions that affect African American youth, 46% of a city's gross income is going to be lost if Buckhead leaves. Now, this ain't me making it up. Buckhead is citing the increase in crime. Now, is that going to affect you? And where do you live now? In what neighborhood? Douglasville and that gated community? Or you or me and my little estate in the country? No, it's not going to affect us. But you know who it's going to affect? If 46% of a city of Atlanta's income goes to another city, they make Buckhead makes their own city, that's 46%. Now, where do you think that's going to be hit? An already failing school system. Well, North Atlanta will probably be absorbed by the Buckhead.
Sure.
And then you got Grady, who's going to keep on being every Atlanta public school teacher's kid and every government official's kid, sending their kids to Grady.
Well, I bet you the police officers don't lose funding. The jails
well,
probably
they can,
won't
but
lose
you got to
funding.
look at you can't. You can't lose it because
that's my point, though, right?
But they want their own police department.
The prisons aren't losing funding, but the schools are, and we want to blame.
But that's my point because
we want to blame the school system and not
they're
the
losing
prison system.
No, my point is
going on in our
my point. I
communities.
said that to simply say that 46% of a city's income is could potentially be lost if the wrong mayor's elected. Mayor Bottoms bowed out. And we don't know who the new chief. We got a good chief, but we don't know who's going to be elected. I bet guaranteed that's going to be the deciding factor if Buckhead leaves. But see, where the issue is that we're not looking at is that the Atlanta public school system has been failing for years. You had a scandal involving the superintendent that was falsifying documents to get the passing grade to hit bonuses. People want that, hey, that's all it was. Not a single one of them went to jail for any amount of time. And what's happening is those kids were failed by the system. Those are the kids that are being arrested now. Those are the kids that are committing the ag assaults and the murders. So the only way to fix that is to bring back, in my opinion, bring back vocational schools, start teaching for the ASFAB so the kids can make it into their military. A lot of people don't realize that the entry score in the ASFAB increased to the point that a lot of African-American kids want to go in the military. They take their ass down there, but they fail the ASFAB and they can't get in.
Very true.
And so now that was an out for a lot of African Americans. A lot of African Americans got their degrees because they went in the military first. Okay, that's no longer an option. Okay, HBCUs are filled with the 10% kids and a few of the inner city kids that can beat that system because they're just that fucking brilliant. But the vast majority of those kids have been failed by African American leaders. And nobody wants to call it out. And that's the issue I think that hurts us the most. People won't call out Jesse Jackson, Race Bader, Al Sharpton. They won't call those people out, O'Shea Jackson, and people like that and Omar that are pointing out more.
You say O'Shea Jackson?
Yeah.
Ice Cube?
Yeah, I think we got to, I agree with what you're saying, but I think we have to move on to the new leaders, or quote unquote.
Exactly.
Jesse Jackson's day is over with. You know what I mean? He did what he did, and I think Jesse did some great things. And you know what I mean? I do believe he got caught up in the pay for play system. You know what I mean? Once money, we were talking about this just yesterday in another conversation, man. Once money comes involved, dynamics change.
Exactly.
I mean, that money's dangerous. You know, money and women are literally that root. You know what I mean? It just leads to destruction for a lot of these. And for a lot of our, not just our leaders, all of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But we're affected. Our community is affected more so. You know what I mean? But these new leaders, and I've always said, our church leaders are failing us.
Exactly. Oh, definitely.
They're failing us. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And I don't even know who the quote unquote leaders are outside of that anymore. I don't know who they are, because all the people you see on TV are these ambulance chasing lawyers. Who, you know what I mean? They're, I know you say a lot of things about Jesse, but I wish there was a Jesse Jackson right now. You know what I'm saying? I wish there was somebody like that. There is nobody. Who can you just, there's no even Al Sharpton. I mean, although you can go, different directions, but they still came to the fight for black people.
Farrakhan?
Yeah, I don't really know what Farrakhan is.
But see, my point is simply this: when you say Farrakhan, everybody's ass gets tight, and that black kid says, "No, not yours, but a lot of the African American 10% goes, oh well, he's not Christian," or oh well, no. I'm saying if you listen to Farrakhan, his blueprint for the African American community. I'm not talking about his white devils and all that talk, but if you look at the positive talk he talks about the African American family, he says the same thing I said.
Absolutely.
Okay,
and he's about holding us accountable for our own actions. That's what I'm talking about.
I would just like to.
But I still think even they still went to a pay for play thing.
You guys are talking about black male leaders stepping up at a time when black men aren't stepping up even as parents, right? So you're asking men who aren't even stepping up to support and parent their own kids to take the lead of a community? You're the one who just gave us the statistics. 78% of kids are being born into single parent households that aren't being fully supported by both parents. So these are the same people who can't keep a household together that you're asking to lead a community. And then you're separating these 78% here these 10% here that are so liberal, they don't give two farts about what's going on in these
No, they
communities.
care,
other
but
than
they're
to throw
looking-
back
they're-
some money. But so who does that leave to actually step up and lead?
I think
How many ministers and preachers do we have? What
I
percentage
don't.
would
But
you
see,
call
I think.
that?
I mean, I don't even think that's what
Where
we're
are you
gonna.
expecting this leadership to come from?
I'll answer
when
that.
We
I'll
can't
answer
get
that.
these men to even step up and lead their homes.
I'll answer that. I left on July the 18th, 2020. I was over the arrest teams, and I was at Ground Zero at CNN when the riot started. And I sat up there and listened and talked to AU Center kids and youth that weren't involved in the riot, and that was outsiders. But I listened to them, and those kids were passionate. They're educated. They truly believe, and they see what's wrong. They see Jesse Jackson for who he is. They see the different black governments for who they are. And I think there's going to be leaders born from this. And I think if we take some of the focus off, always wanting to sacrifice law enforcement, because what's happening in America, we've attacked law enforcement. What we've lost sight of, the endless supply that's being made by a system that's failed the very people it's supposed to protect, the very people it's supposed to serve, the very government that's supposed
It
to.
didn't fail them. Those white people are very protected, very served.
I'm talking
That's
about
who it
no.
supposed- that's
I'm
what
totally
the
different
system
about
was
that. No.
supposed to protect and serve.
African Americans made this motherfucker. We fought in every major conflict in United States
That
history.
is the African American
Okay.
delusion.
No,
That
no,
because we
okay.
fought that
Slave.
we
No, my
deserve
point
a
is simply
word
this.
of
No, I'm
freedom.
saying that we built. The America was built on the backs of
Yes,
slaves.
it was.
Okay, so with that, with serving, with the money we put into the system every single year, we should stop asking and demanding our leaders fix it so we educate ourselves. Jews do it. If a school system's failing, they may have a school of 25, but they're 25 kids that are going to that school. Pace Academy, all these other schools that were made and designed solely because the parochial schools in Atlanta, Leavitt, St. Pius, and Marist, couldn't take the amount of kids that were being generated by Atlanta wealth. So what did they do? They made Pace, Westminster, and all these other schools came about to take that offload. We need to start doing that ourselves. LeBron has the blueprint. Instead of LeBron commenting on dumb shit, LeBron should put the blueprint out of that school he designed, and that's the answer.
People would jump on that. He don't have to. They would jump on it if they wanted to, but a great point, and the leaders, like you got Ossoff and what's the guy just won? Warnock. All right. So I saw on the news the other day that they got Morris Brown accreditation. That's awesome. You know what I mean? They got their accreditation back, and those guys made a great effort towards it. Now the question is, and I don't know the answer. I don't know if it's happened or not, but whatever bill that went in place to get that $50 billion, where are black leaders at, the elected officials, to say, lobbying for, those type things for our communities?
Where the hell is
because you're
$50
saying,
million?
you're expecting the government to do it. Well, yeah, in certain aspects you are, because you voted for them. You know what I mean?
And why are
you
voting
vote,
for people that aren't helping us?
Well, it's not a matter of not helping us. It's a matter of putting the pressure on. And that's where those quote-unquote black leaders are supposed to step in to push those quote-unquote elected officials to push for certain things.
The thing about
because
it
if they can, they got a Morris Brown accreditation. That's phenomenal. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah,
now let's trickle that.
Frank
Now let's
Ski
trickle that
tried
money.
to get it, and they wouldn't take the money from Frank Ski because he wanted to put his name on the bill.
The problem
Now
is,
let's trickle.
it's
That's
not
crazy.
it's not who's in office and who's the leader and who's the problem is the policies. And unless we're getting the policies changed,
That's
nothing else
my
matters,
point, though.
No, see, well,
That's
we're
my
looking-
point, though.
That's that
That-
black 10%. You're looking for a government that has continued to fail us to beat a bailout.
No, that's what you're looking for.
No. What I said, black leaders need to deal with the money that they can control. The Atlanta City budget. Faction, just maybe do an all-female and all-male school, and just see if starting them off from pre-K, all set it up. You got the money, get a grant. They give grants for every damn thing else. okay, and then deal with that, because what to me, you voting for Biden, the first 2 executive orders he put out, one covered Asians and Pacific Islanders. I'm not saying there's not any poor Asians in America, but you got to realize that most of those people immigrate into America. They get stipends coming in and all kind of funding to help them start off. Okay, if you look at the Japanese that were in internment camps, they got money. We never got our 40 acres and a mule. So all I'm saying is, when you have black leaders, let's be radical. You can come up and do the belt line, and everybody lines their pockets that was in city government by buying up property before the belt line came in. Okay, nobody wants to call them out for that. Okay, mayors that continue to leave as millionaires that came in worth a couple $100,000, nobody wants to call that out. All I'm asking those same leaders is, why you line your fucking pockets?
Right.
Take care of the African-American youth. And the way to do that is to get same-sex schools. Okay, start it off. Okay, now think about it. Now, this is going to blow you away now. I'm just going to say this. Kirkwood.
What?
There wasn't a motherfucking charter school until the gentrification came. Okay? So if you can make a charter school in Kirkwood when the color changed, take your monkey asses and goddamn put in a male and female school, male and female, and start it off. What happened with the charter schools? What happened with the charter schools? The demographics were changing. Right. The schools in the area that they were moving in were violent and failing. They put in a charter school in that area, and that was to suck everybody in, or they go to Grady or North Atlanta. Okay? Now that's what happened. Nobody wants to talk about that. Why not do a charter school, see if it works? Male, female, African American. Okay, look at, when you do a charter school, look at not East Atlanta, Carver. Carver, those kids go all over the world and excel. You know why? Because they put in a system from pre-K and those kids excel in it. But you know what stops them? They're also housed with the uncleans. Okay? So a charter school is pretty much in there surrounded by uncleans and decent black kids that aren't getting the opportunities. But they always got to have some obstacle. Instead of just making it, damn it, we're setting up a male and female school. Let's see how that goes and fund it and start a charter school, have Atlanta area check, have an outreach program where from 9th grade, bust them in, expand it, where they can come in and go to Atlanta area tech and learn skills and have a pipeline for it. Because what happens is you have the Hope Scholarship and the black kids are fucking flunking out the goddamn school from the Cab, Clayton, and Fulton, and nobody wants to spoke. Everybody doesn't want to know why? Because of the tax that black 10%. It attacks those Delta, Kappas, Omegas.
And you know, but they're not necessarily.
Like I'm in that
they're not. All of them not necessarily failing out. It's the requirement is significantly higher.
What is it? Maintenance or what?
It's 80 something. It's a high.
But my point is,
it's a high grade. I don't remember what it is, but it's 3 point something.
But to see,
you know what I mean, 3 points. Not even 3.0. It's 3 point.
Is that over? Yeah, but
so the requirement is so much higher.
But see, my point is simply this: if you look at the African American kids that don't flunk out in it, look at what schools and systems they go to.
I know, Cobb County.
But my point is, the unfortunate part of that lottery money is that the requirement requires something higher. You know what I mean? And it doesn't give and it immediately takes them out. I mean, so now I lost my money. Now what do I? You know what I mean?
But
that requirement shouldn't be as stringent, and they should give some kind of leeway based on the community that kid comes from.
But you also got to look at it like this. That's kind of like a fail.
That's not necessarily lowering your standards, but you have to. But
you see, if you don't deal with,
you gotta give them opportunity. You gotta give them opportunity.
But my point is,
you gotta give them opportunity, especially after the freshman year. I mean, that's a big jump.
You can't change it. If a K can't spell cat, if you spot him a C and a T, and you're expecting that kid to go to college, that's a pipe dream. But what you can do, that same kid start them off in pre-K in an all-male, all-female school.
Though. I mean, because let's be honest. You're talking about this kid can't spell cat, but this kid knows every lyric to every song that comes on the radio. They know the explicit lyric versions. It's not that these kids aren't capable of being educated.
Exactly.
It's these kids are opting out of being educated.
But that's because they don't believe in the American dream. America has failed.
But as the educators not being able to relate to some of those kids as well.
Or not trying.
That's true.
They're doing like you said. Oh, I'll just give them computers and whatever. And yeah, you're giving a kid a computer. You know what he's doing? He's writing rap lyrics on.
But it's not just that. A lot of it is the schools can't afford educators. Like, I mean, I'm not a certified teacher. I'm a substitute.
I'm sorry, but I just want to correct you on that. Atlanta public school systems is the highest. I think we're number one, unless they've been knocked out. Highest paid school system in Georgia.
Well, I work for Clayton County, and as I was saying, there are a lot of classes that are being run by long-term substitutes where these kids haven't seen a real teacher for several months or years because I don't know if there's not enough teachers applying or they're not paying teachers enough. I'm not going to speak to what the reason is, but what I will say is that there are so many things going on in the school system that are working against these kids beyond just the kids working against themselves. For one, like I said, there's long-term subs in a lot of classes where they actually need real teachers like science, English, and math, which the Hope Scholarship funding is based on because it's 3.0, but it's based specifically on those 4 subjects of science, literature, math, and I think history is the 4th one. And if you have classes where you don't have an actual teacher in those classes and you have somebody who's just there collecting some money to keep the kids quiet for hours on end, month after month, these kids are going like, okay, so we haven't had a real teacher all year. What's my grade going to be? What grade can you give them?
And what the parents are screaming about.
Yeah, but somebody has to start them, and we don't have enough
But
people
my point is, the very black leaders that we're giving passes.
So in addition to the fact that there have subs, we also have kids who are having to repeat classes that they already passed just because there's not enough space in the class that they need. So I have kids who are taking 8th grade science in 10th grade, and they're bored as hell because they're like, I took this in 8th grade, I passed it, why am I back in it? I'm like, go to your counselor, tell your counselor to put you in whatever science you need to be in. My counselor says she can't change me. You need to tell your parent to come up here. My mom doesn't want to come up here. So, I mean, there's so many aspects of the system that are failing these kids. It's not the kids all the time. Part of it is
I'm not saying it's never the kids.
No,
I never said it was the kids.
Sometimes it is, because some of these kids are ignorant as
No,
hell.
the kids are ignorant because the system failed them.
I'm saying hell fucking yeah.
Anybody.
I want to kill
Exactly.
I want to kill
Anybody.
That would work because what's happening
We have enough clubs.
We have
enough clubs.
We continue
Stop the clubbing.
to
Let's get to the kids.
10%, that black 10% write checks that those poor black kids' ass have to cash, and they're fucking it up, but they're still pulling up in a Mercedes. They're still looking out for everybody from a 3-bit alphabet.
But what I was going to say is
fraternity and sorority. You know what I'm talking about. And so when they do that, the kids are being failed. These kids are, if you start in K and work them all the way through, they'll pass. Like when the 100 Black Businessmen of Atlanta, when they started going and mentoring those kids all excel.
All achieved.
But
Absolutely.
they started at a low level. But you can't let a kid get to 8th grade and can't spell cat and then say, well, you know what? We're going to give him a free scholarship. He's going to fail. Yes. He's not educated enough to pass.
No, but you can take a group of 8th graders and start educating them
It
so
doesn't
that they
work.
can
It
spell
doesn't
cat.
work. You can't
so
catch up because where do you learn to
impress
add?
upon them the
Kindergarten
importance
and
to
first
their
grade.
life of what it means to learn how to read, of what it means to learn how to do math, because a lot of it is just they
You're
don't
talking
know.
about a kid, like
they
you
don't know
said,
how it's going
his
to benefit
parents
them.
are pushing rap and watch it
And I
be
get
an athlete.
that, but as a person who's worked in the school system, I will talk to these kids and I'll be like, okay, I'm working on algebra today, because like I said, I'm in a lot of different positions. These kids are like, I don't need to know that. I'm not going to use math in the real world. I'm not going to use algebra. I already know how to add and subtract. I'm like, what do you mean you're not going to use algebra? This is how your interest payments are calculated. If you ever want to own anything in life, if you want to own a house, if you want to own a car, if you want to own anything of value that you have to finance, algebra means how much your monthly payment is based on.
Well, that black 10% working over there.
No, I'm just saying based on the interest rate, based on the number of months that you're paying on it, based on the actual price of the car.
Sorry,
I'm like, you need to know algebra just so that you can understand how your purchases are going to affect your pockets. And if you don't take the time to learn it, you're going to get screwed out of your money. When you help them to understand that they're going to get screwed out of their money, then they start. But a lot of teachers are not even able to teach them that from that perspective.
Parent does play a role, but unfortunately, most of these homes, we're talking about a single family home households who, if the mother's working, she don't have the time. Yeah, she don't have the time to.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And or the mother is just living out the system and don't really care one way or the other.
Everybody wants to say, okay, if you want to make it fair, measure that black 10% kids against white American kids, and we're right there with them. But when you have an underclass who's been betrayed by the black leadership that they elected,
the prison system.
Okay, see, that's that black liberal approach. You're talking about writing a check the black kids ask. It ain't got shit to do with the price of the time. They're going to continue end up in jail if you don't give them a way to work their way out of it.
Don't stop with one. If you're going to start going down the list of people victimizing our children for profit, don't stop with government. Don't stop with the school system, because the prison system is just as much guilty of victimizing our kids for profit.
Those kids are ending up there because you're asking somebody
up there.
not
you're
to want it. Okay,
there.
you have the very people that you said they want to be rappers. Ciroc. Okay, you have $130. I don't know how much Lowe's costs. I don't know how much yours costs. I don't know how much yours costs. But we're putting that in their face. Okay, you're talking about kids that are unable to afford that. And their moms are uneducated. Their dads, they're being raised by absentee dads, or the dad may or may not be involved, but their dad's not capable. If you go to Zone 1, which is Bankhead, Ashby, Martin Luther King, if you go to any of those fast food restaurants, including Chick-fil-A there, and you look at the average age of the people working there, it's older. It's not kids from high school like it is out where I live or where you live. It's adults, because that's looked as an actual job in those communities. Why? Because if you go through, that's the only place where those people can be employed at their educational level, because Atlanta is a mecca if you got technical or if you got a degree. But if you don't, you're ass out. The average apartment almost costs $1,000, even in the hood now. So they're getting forced further out. That's why the crime's spreading. Because these people can't spell, and I'm not saying like they're evil or whatever. It's simply because they're undereducated, because the school systems failed them. And now you're asking these people to make decisions. Oh, like, well, you need to know how to do algebra. Hell, these kids never saw algebra. You had a school system that faked the test for them, so half of them can't read during a whole period of time, and they never read back.
Telling these kids they need to know algebra. I am the algebra teacher.
I understand that. No, I'm not knocking
as
you.
a person.
What I'm saying is,
who's watching a college graduate telling them what they should have learned.
My point is,
I'm helping them to understand why it's
algebra
important.
if you didn't learn 1 + 1.
And I'm helping them to understand the
exactly.
importance of learning
or half of 1,000
in the position
but the
to
point
learn,
is,
so that they don't end up there.
But you can't unfuck education that was fucked up in kindergarten and first grade.
Yes, you can, if you put in those children's mind a desire. If you
what grade do you
mind,
teach? What grade do you teach?
I teach high school.
Okay, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade?
Preferably, yes.
Okay, so now you're telling me now, I'm not being funny, not being an asshole, but you're telling me your pep talk is going to unfuck somebody that didn't get basic math in elementary school?
Yeah.
I call
That's what I'm
bullshit.
telling you. You're not there. You didn't even let me finish my pep talk. You don't know how great it was.
Oh no, it would work where you live, and it would work where he lives, and work where I live. But
No,
where they
I've
live is
given
not.
pep talks that have changed lives, okay? You have no idea my skill set. Do not underestimate the ability of my
I'm sold.
capacity
I'm
to
sold.
speak to these young people who have no concept of what the real world is like. I tell them, I take them to ground zero and build them up after I break them all the way the fuck down. Okay, that's what I do.
So you
and
reteach
that's what I'm good at.
their junior year. You reteach.
No, I don't do any of that.
Elementary.
I inspire them to want more for themselves that they previously wanted or even knew was possible. That's what I do.
But imagine if you had that plus the vocational schools, you know what I mean, to direct some of them to.
I agree with that.
We
I'm
need to
not
fix the
negating
system and give them
the
an
potential
option.
of vocational schools at all.
Yeah, because
I'm
think
just
about it.
saying
When the kid
that's
goes to
not the
vocational
only
school
problem.
and gets a way to protect himself and to
But
build
even
a
with the
household.
vocational school, you still have to know basics like algebra and language. You can't be an electrician and you can't read. You can't
Okay.
be a plumber and if you can't read. Like
Those
there
are the
still
smarter
things
ones.
that
Those
you
are the
got to be
smarter
able to
ones.
read instruction. No, they're not small words.
What
I've looked
what
at
I'm saying is
HVAC
a plumber's helper,
manuals
a plumber's
that
helper, and a brick mason
requires,
make
you're
good
talking
money.
about- so now you're talking about assisting, not even being like the main person.
No, you
And
gotta
what I'm
start.
saying is, regardless of where you start, you still need basics. You still have to basically know how to read the manual to get a plumber's license or an
Rebuild the
electrician's
system.
license.
What I'm
or
talking
any of
about
that.
is
And that's what
rebuilding
I'm
the
talking
system.
About.
They have
And once you rebuild the system, if you're qualified to go into a vocational school, you're probably also qualified to go into college.
No, but
because
that's
we
not how it
rebuilt
works,
the system
sweetheart.
enough to give
That's
you
not how
that
it works.
basic education that's
What
going to
happens
take you
is
into those vocations.
The Cobb County school systems and a lot of school systems in Georgia used to have a vocational system. What happens when the kids we go to onto the college prep, the other kids went to vocational school, they went to OCS and
Even
OC
a dental
school.
assistant has to know dental terminology.
No, my point is they go to the vocational school. Then what happens is electricians union, they join the union. I think the county at that point was paying for them to join the union. They learn the basics, and then they become journeyman and electrician's helper, plumber's helper, brick mason's helper. And so brick masons will go hire those kids. They got the basics. They learn at OJT, on-the-job training, but they're getting paid $17 an hour that takes them out of that scope. When they work their way up, the ones that make it, those kids, what do you think their kids, when they been a brick mason, electrician, and a carpenter, what do you think their kids are going to end up going?
The same
College.
thing. But
No, either
no.
that or college.
But my point
Okay.
is, regardless of the vocation, they still need to learn what's half of 1,000. They still need to learn fractions. They still need to learn basic math. They
And
still
every
need to
vocational
learn
school has
algebra.
that as
They
part
still
of the core.
and every school should have that as part of the course.
Okay.
That's my point.
I'll call
if you're
bullshit
missing
again.
that, then you're not going anywhere, whether
call
it's
bullshit
vocation
again.
or college.
This is what the
if
point is
you're
simply this.
missing basic literacy, if you're missing basic English, if you're missing
Georgia-
basic
Georgia-
math,
Georgia
no amount of
conquered that.
vocational
Okay.
schools are going to help you.
This is what I'm going to call bullshit. How many different degrees do they have in Georgia for high school, graduating seniors?
What do you mean? Degrees?
High school diplomas. There's a one with college credit, the one that went to a college-based curriculum. There's the ones that just basically get a diploma saying they attended so they can get into the workforce, certificate of attendance diploma. Okay, and there's one other one, I forgot what it is. Oh, yeah, the technical one. Okay, so what I'm saying is simply this. I'm not saying you're not right, but what you'd be right when they break the system down and rebuild it, yes. But while it's being rebuilt, you have to get a viable option for those kids who don't believe in the American dream, that have been fucked over by the American system, that hasn't looked out for them, and black leaders that haven't looked out for them. If you put vocational schools there, if you get the kids that are smart enough to go to the academic, but they can't quite get that SAT, you know what would be really good? If you had counselors and teachers every weekend for the whole year, from their sophomore year on study and teach the ASVAB.
And
So
I'm
those
not
kids can
disagreeing
pass the
with you.
test. Then you'd actually be helping those kids instead of putting a middle class system and mindset on kids
It's not
that
that.
aren't.
How do you make your vocational school look more appealing than the trap? Because that's what you're fighting against. You're not fighting against
No,
college.
it's-
You're
By
not fighting
allowing-
against
and-
middle-class America.
and-
You're fighting against the allure of selling drugs and doing all kinds of other stuff so that they can make quick
You
money.
make it more attractive by showing the different options, and Douglasville does have something like that, and it doesn't take away. They'll still allow you to go to that vocational school, but you can still participate in sports at your home school. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't take away. You don't have to lose anything, but it does give you the opportunity to explore the things that you may be, your skill set, whatever may hinge towards. You know what I mean? So it's a great concept.
It is, and
It's a
it's
great
being done,
concept,
but on
and certain
campus.
areas do it, and those areas that have those struggles, they need that. If they had that, it would give so many other options.
It is available though, but it's just a lot of times.
No, it's not.
No, it is. There's a lot of vocational opportunities available to kids.
Do they
And
push it?
The kids either aren't aware or don't want it in a lot of cases, or they don't find out about it until they get kicked out of regular school and then have to go to open campus school. So the open campus school has it. So the school that I worked at, hold on.
Attendance thing.
The school that I worked at, when you're talking about like military options, this school has a whole aviation section where they've got flight simulators, they've got rockets, they've got a whole design section where they've got like things that they can print banners. They've got so many options available to those kids. Most of the kids either don't know it's there or don't want to participate in it because that's not where they want to go. It's not cool. They would rather try and play ball, rap,
That
or
doesn't
sell
help them
drugs.
pass ASVAB, though.
So,
That doesn't help them pass ASVAB. You know what helps them pass ASVAB? Basic math.
The thing you were just cussing me out about when I was trying to tell you how important it
What I'm
was.
saying is pushing it on kids it's like kids a blank slate. Yeah. If that's a conversation you have with somebody
No,
in the formative years, when they're in 11th and 12th
who's
grade,
in 9th or 10th grade, and they don't have a desire to want to learn math because they don't think it's going to help them, then yes, it is important to help them to understand the ways that it will help them in life so that they can have a desire to want to learn. Because what I face on a daily basis is lack of desire. It's just
exactly.
they
But
don't care.
where do you think that lack of desire comes from?
A lack of belief in what's possible, and that's what I'm saying. Like, so they don't know what's possible.
Lack of belief of what's possible.
If I make enough money, I can have whatever I want. And what I be trying to tell them is, if you make a lot of money and you don't know how to read and you can't do basic math, there's a lot of people who are going to steal it from you through contracts because you can't read the fine print. There's a lot of people who are going to take it from you through interest rates because you don't know basic math. There's a lot of people who are going to take advantage of you. So it's not about how much money you make. It's about how much you can keep based on the information that you have and the knowledge that you acquire while you're here. So spend your time acquiring this knowledge and stop standing in the hallway and thinking you're cool so that you can keep however much money you make pursuing this dream that you have of being a rapper, a trapper, or a ball player.
And that would work in our school systems and where I live and where my kids grew up, and that speech would work. But when you're talking about a kid that goes to school so he can eat that day, that goes early and make sure he goes to school so he can catch
So
breakfast
you're trying to
and
imply
lunch
that I
before.
don't know the kind of kids I'm talking to?
Oh no, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying you have a very
Well,
Becky-ish opinion. No, you're 100% right.
It's a Ciroc.
No, I honestly think you're very right in what you're saying, but I think to the kids that I arrested during my 30-year career, the kids that we chase and you chase, the kids when we're out at 2 and 3 in the morning on Stewart Avenue, when we're out there together on Metropolitan Parkway and making arrests, those kids, and when we, it's a kiss of death when we get a juvenile, like, oh, hell no.
Right.
We're pretending we didn't see it. You know why? Because we got to ride around with that motherfucker for the next 8 to 10 hours trying to find his mom and dad or somebody that will take him. When he says, my grandma, and you knock on the grandma, and she pretends she's not, you see the light come on, and then they see y'all with the juvenile, and they pretend they don't want to come to the door. That's what I'm talking about you're fighting. And that's
those are the same exact kids that I deal with.
But
And
that
those are the
speech
same
that you
kids
gave them
that seek
is
me
like
out,
speaking Greek. You were
looking
speaking
for
Greek
advice,
and Chinese to those
looking
kids.
for hope, looking for. Whether I'm speaking Greek or Chinese, I speak in their language. So that's why they keep coming back to me, even though I'm just a sub.
No, I'm not saying you
trying to
don't
get
reach them.
more-
I'm not talking about those kids that make it and find that dream, because those are the ones that don't fall into that 78% that can't keep the Hope Scholarship, or 70-some%. The ones we need to change, that we haven't talked about the violence, but the ones that change the violence and keep the violence and lower it, those are the ones you got to speak to, and those aren't the ones that are going to be there to have a conversation with you because they're in juvenile or they're in that remedial class.
I've been there too.
But my point is, okay, if you tell a kid in remedial, I mean, it's hard.
I know.
I
deal with those kids. You don't have to tell me how hard it is. I deal with kids who can't read on a daily. This is what I'm saying. Like, the same kids you're talking about. There are schools set up to educate juvenile kids where they can't even go to regular schools because they're in juvenile detention center. The teachers have to go in to the juvenile facility and teach them in that space where it's 9 kids in a classroom, and these kids they don't know when they're getting out. They don't know when they're coming back.
Do you think there's a chance to help save those kids?
I absolutely do think there is a chance.
Is it the same type of chance of a snowball's chance in HE?
I feel like there's a stronger chance than that. I feel like those kids need a lot of therapy and a lot of love and a lot of attention, but I do believe it's possible, yes.
And I said...
At the high school age?
At the high school age. Because you guys are seeing these kids come at you with resistance from that I don't want to go to jail mentality. Those aren't the same kids that talk to me. You know what I mean? Like, I see the kids because they're coming from a different place. I see the hearts of these kids. You see the hard heads of these kids.
No, what I see, because of units I've been in, when you work fusion and you lock that kid up that's 15 for murder, and when you slap them cuffs on him and he sits on that steps, you know what he looks like and sounds like? A 15-year-old that fucked their life up. To reach those kids, and I've been joking, this is Ciroc a lot, but what I would say is this: to make changes in those kids' lives, you got to do it in pre-K. You got to do it in kindergarten.
At that point, it's too late. You're not there to make changes to keep pre-K kids from becoming those kids. Yes, you have to make changes at pre-K and kindergarten. But we're not talking about pre-K and kindergarten. We're talking about the kids that are already 15, that
Those
are
kids
already there.
and
you're saying they're already lost, and I'm saying
lost,
I don't believe they
but
are.
to fix
I'm
the
saying
system,
they need love,
that's what
they
we
need
need
some
to-
attention, they
okay,
need someone to
good, and that's
believe in
another
them, and they
point
need
here.
some therapy.
What I'm
They
saying
need
is
help.
it's going to help us
They
as
don't need
African
prison.
Americans. As African Americans, if we quit doing that liberal approach and we say, hey, the system's broke, we're going to rebuild it. We're going to help these kids as best we can. We're going to teach them the ASVAB so they can actually get into the military, but gives them an option. We're going to
let's send them out to go get killed in the plight of American
Not necessarily killed. I mean, it happens, unfortunately, but the change they could make for some of those kids, you'd be amazed.
It's phenomenal.
You'd be amazed.
It's phenomenal.
Some of them have never had structure in their entire
And they
lives.
excel once they get it.
In their entire life. Imagine just giving them some kind of structure. It'd be the first time that a lot of those kids actually had structure
And 3
why
meals
can't
in
we
the
and their
same-
lives.
and 3
Why
meals in
can't
the
we
same
create
day.
a system that gives them structure and helps them to afford a livelihood without also putting them in the line of fire for this
Oh
country
my
that doesn't
God,
give a
Shalane.
fuck about them?
Oh, my God. Okay, first of all, that system's already in place and it failed. That system
what
failed
is that?
miserably.
What
The
system
school
is that?
system as it exists
That's
now.
not the school system as it is. That's not what our school system was designed to do. Our school system was designed to teach people how to go sit in factories and work all day. That's what our school system was built for. Our school system was built for factory workers. It was not built for anything else.
Well-
it was built to help keep people in place so that upper class white people can continue to stay rich off the backs of lower class people. Period. And when those people don't conform to that system, they built another secondary system called prison that's going to be like, okay, so you didn't want to conform to our factory system. Now we've got another system where you're just a slave. So why can't we as a people build a system that actually benefits our people, not designed by the people who brought us here to enslave us and continue to
let me ask you a question, Christy. Just let's say your theory, right? Let's go off of your theory. What do you think your school system, the one that you currently work under and have been for a long time, what can they do in that school? Let's not talk about the government. Let's talk about anything else. Let's talk about the school that you work in. What can they do differently to achieve that goal? That school.
To achieve the goal of
everything you just said, everything you just talked about. You say you haven't. They're still possible. I'm saying, what are you saying that school, just that school alone, can do? What are they doing wrong right now that they could do better?
What I think the school could do to benefit kids?
No, that school. Just let's focus on your school alone. No, not any. Your school alone.
My school?
Yeah.
I would say that they can offer counseling and therapy for kids that have gotten.
All right, now think about what you just said. Mm-hmm. Those same kids that don't care. How you gonna get them into counseling?
Those kids are anxious to talk to somebody. Those kids come and talk to anybody who will listen. You don't have to get them into counseling.
How do you identify them?
Make it available to everyone.
Make it available means they have to take the time themselves to go into that office to talk to somebody.
And also, not just that, if a teacher sees that this particular kid is presenting as a behavior problem, that's the first clue that there's something going on with that kid, psychologically, mentally, at home, whatever the case. Yes. Okay, instead of sending them to the principal's office, instead of sending them to the resource officer, let's get this kid some counseling to figure out what's going on with them so that we can get them back on track.
Okay, I'll just blow your way on this one. How many people in your school? How many kids are in your school?
Roughly.
I don't know.
Come on now.
900.
900? Okay, now. I'm not gonna say anything nasty. Now, just answer this question. Again? How many counselors are in your school?
He asked me, "What can we do?" Not
how
what
many counselors
exists.
are in your school?
I don't know.
Oh, you go. 9
times out of 10 is 1
or 2 or maybe 4 if it's a bigger school.
I doubt 4.
Well, we'll just give.
I don't know.
Okay, you the math. Divide 4 into 900.
I get it. He asked me, what can we do, or what do I think would help?
My point is simply this. I agree with you. I'm joking around.
No, here's the thing.
Because JT's not here, so I'm the comment.
In an ideal world, what do I think would make a difference? I'm telling you what would make a difference. Is that what's happening? Obviously not. Does that mean it's not possible?
Why is it not happening?
No, I don't believe it's not possible. Why is it not happening?
Yes.
Because we don't have people who care enough to put those kind of positions in place.
In your school.
Yeah.
With that black principal and that black superintendent.
Yes.
Okay, that's my point.
Here lies the problem.
You're helping my whole stance. Because what I'm saying here...
I'm not saying the schools aren't the problem.
I'm simply saying
they're not the only problem. I'm the first person to say that the schools are the problem. But there are multiple problems even within the school system.
Exactly,
and
but we have to start at ground zero. What we have to do is not give up on the kids that are already in it, but fix the system right now, because what's happening, the very criminal justice system that you keep on harping on is bad. We're allowing a system to exist that's keeping the pipeline going. And if we don't start at the rudimentary levels and change it, we're going to continue that pipeline pumping, and we'll be having this, our kids will be having the same conversation in their 50s and your 30s. You understand what I'm saying?
Why can't we encourage these kids to become counselors instead of cops? And then if we have more counselors than cops,
that's a great idea if the school system wasn't flawed.
Well, and to that point, you have a situation where you have, and you said it earlier about, the numbers game. You got to get so many kids to get the funding. And there's a lot of aspects, the same thing in the police department. You know what I mean? You have to have so many arrests to get, and I'm a firm believer, if police officers weren't, if the focus wasn't on arrests in agencies, if the focus wasn't on arrests, if there was no numbers game, for lack of better words, where, they want so many arrests made, and this is throughout any agency. You know what I mean? If arrest wasn't the focus, if it was the word is used, community policing. You know what I mean? Where you're not out there to try to figure out how many people you can arrest that day. And the same thing for the school system. If it wasn't a numbers game, you know what I mean? If it wasn't a numbers game, if it wasn't about we have to have X amount of scores in order to get the proper funding. You know what I mean? Because now that's what leads to cheating and all the other BS, because it becomes a numbers game.
And the bonuses for achieving those numbers.
So it's a numbers game at that point. So now the kids aren't the focus. You know what I mean? The kids aren't the focus. And it's the same thing, you know, and I know you're like down a police officer, but it's the same thing on the streets. You know what I mean? If that wasn't the focus, you could have a lot of change. If numbers meant nothing.
Right. Exactly.
You don't have to bring no arrest. The only thing I want to see is how many people did you stop and talk to? You know, we used to have that little.
They had that, but see what happens.
We used to have that,
and I just left. And I tell you, the biggest problem is you have that black liberal mindset that says community-oriented policing, which works if they actually do it. It's been around in Atlanta since when? The early 90s.
Yeah.
Has it ever worked? No. Because they'll sit up there and say we're community-oriented policing. We want it. But just like Lo said, success is measured in numbers.
Period. Same thing with the school system.
Exactly. So what you have...
Yeah, but those numbers are just funding the pockets of the same people that have oppressed us forever.
But that's
that couple. Now imagine you being a kid that's growing up in a situation where the police have become an occupying force. You have black leaders that aren't fixing the system to teach you. It failed you in pre-K and first grade and kindergarten. You're flawed because the substandard, I can't even say substandard teacher. The teacher may have been right, but it didn't reach because what is communication? If you're putting out something, but it's not being conveyed to the person and they're not receiving the way you want it, communication has failed. So you have youth that have been failed by the system and they're being pushed along, and they meet an outstanding teacher like yourself that says, you know what? Damn, these other 8 years or 9 years you've been in school, right now you can go back, learn how to add, learn how to subtract. And I venture anybody that's here, if you could go back and say your first grade, your kindergarten through 8th grade was erased, and you half-ass learned it for whatever reason, and then at 10th grade you got that great pep talk, is it going to work?
No.
And I'm not saying you're not wrong.
Realistically, it's not.
Realistically, it's not going to work, because I'm not talking about the kids that can, because those kids that listen to you, those are the kids that are still passing and going to college despite the system. The kids that are fucked are the ones that's mom's a crackhead, dad's in jail, mom's working 2 jobs so she can't.
If they even know that.
And the turnkey, latchkey kids. And so the kids failed before he starts because he didn't get the foundation.
I agree with you, but I'm saying for those kids, vocational school is not going to work either, because right now in the same school I'm talking about that I work in, there's a culinary arts, right? Which is what, cooking, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, the majority of the kids have problem in cooking class because they can't do fractions. So when you say, okay, this recipe calls for a half a cup for 2 people, how many is that for 10 people? The kid can't do the basic fucking math to figure out how many cups they need to feed 10 people instead of 2.
And that's when you have basic
math. So no matter what vacation you go into, they still need the basics. If you can't read the directions on the recipe, you can't make the cake.
So how do you get that? You're saying that, you know, you can make change at the high school level. How are you going to get it at the high school level?
Identify the kids that don't have that and see to it that they get that kind of instruction.
How are you going to see to it?
I mean, it's the remedial instruction that they're trying to get there. But if they don't have the teachers, if they don't have enough teachers giving remedial instruction, or if kids are getting passed instead of identified as needing remedial instruction, these are all parts of the problem. If the kids need remedial instruction but have psychological barriers where they don't even want to live till the next day, let alone show up for school, then there's things that need to be taken care of in that aspect too. There's so many things that these kids are facing on a day-to-day basis that need to be addressed, that we can't just sit here and be like, this is a solution, this is a solution. There are multiple things that need to go into making sure that these kids get to where they need to be. But a lot of it also is dealing with the fact that so many of these kids are dealing with PTSD from being over militarized. Some of them are dealing with mental issues from being and abandonment issues from being raised in single parent households. Some of them are living in abusive situations, both physically, mentally, verbally, and sexually. So there's so many things that need to be addressed. It's hard for a kid to show up after being raped the night before and want to focus on a fucking English lesson. That's insane for us to even expect that of them. And I don't even want to get into what the food does and the soda pop does and the candy does to these kids' ability to pay attention in class. I'm just talking about basic, like, this is what I deal with at home. Now you're expecting me to come to school and perform. And when you're talking about that kind of stuff, it's not enough to say, yes, let's add vocation. That's not enough.
No, it's just a start.
It's one option, but it's not an option that's going to work if these kids can't still do basic math and read basic English, which they think that they don't need because they've got these cell phones telling them that it's okay to put LOL and TMV or whatever in the text message, and that's how people talk today. Like, we have to get to these kids on a level where they start to realize that reality TV isn't reality, that everything that the media is putting in their face isn't something that is for them or going to benefit them in life, where there's more options available than rapping, trapping, and balling. Exactly. We have to make these kids know that life is not what you see on TV, and that there's so many things that need to happen just to get that level of understanding to these kids. Because I deal with kids on a regular basis who think they don't need to learn how to read or write because they got the internet and they can Google, right? Siri can tell me. And I'm like, what are you going to do if they disconnect the internet? And they're like, that can't happen. The fuck you mean that can't happen? It's happened in Africa. It's happened in several countries around the world. Well, that can't happen in the U.S. Are you crazy? Like, that's exactly what they want you to think, that you don't need to learn the basics because you can always ask Alexa.
Their kids are learning the basics.
Yeah, no, their kids are learning more than the basics.
More than the
Those
basics,
kids are excelling in STEAM categories, and our kids can't even pick up enough steam to get to school.
But until we correct the issue at the lowest level, there's going to be some casualties. Okay, but there's casualties anyway. But if we don't have an honest dialogue of admitting that we've been misled by our leaders,
at the lowest
it's not
level,
gonna be fixed.
problem with correcting the problem at the lowest level is that the kids at the higher levels are the ones that are bullying the lower level kids. The parents are also bullying lower level kids. When kids come home speaking proper English, their parents are like, why are you talking like that in my house? We don't talk like that. You better talk. You know what I mean? Like, these parents are being insulted. The parents are being insulted because they feel like their kids know too much. There's so many aspects of it.
But that's the problem I have with the black 10%. You won't call out the uncleans. We never call them out. You spoke a mouthful and it was all truthful. But nobody, we don't have a black leader. Obama didn't do it. Obama, first term, I understand. Second term, he should have sat down and said, look, white America, just jokingly said, white America, you can turn off your TV. And say, hey, look, we need to quit and control these niggas before they destroy us all. And I hate that word. That's why I use the word unclean. But until we start dealing with that, because I don't consider them African Americans. I don't consider them black. Because black people, the black people I know love one another. We nurture each other. We help each other out. We can talk and joke around and not shoot each other, not stab each other. They become infected with hate to the point that they're the main threat to an African American. It's not a white cop. It's not a black cop. Not institutions set up to continue to put them there because of the way some of the laws are set up and enforced. But it's black leaders that won't speak out on that.
It's not about just speaking out on it, though. We have to create policies. We have to do more than
to speak out of it.
We have to affect
once you
change.
speak out, but once you speak out on it, it makes those words powerful. But when those words are unspoken, they're thought but unspoken, like the unclean comment. I can say unclean, and everybody knows what I meant, but they'll be like, so, what do you mean by unclean? When they know exactly what I mean by unclean.
I didn't know.
Like when you live in a black area and you go across town to go to the movies. When you don't go by South DeKalb Mall and they got a 30% discount because you know the stuff's going to not be the same stuff in North Lake, Lenox.
MJ, is there anything that you didn't discuss on stats or anything you want to cover?
Okay. The only thing I will say is there's
Sorry, I usurped your.
crime in African American cities is increasing tenfold. It's going unchecked. The officers are believing that they're besieged almost. And what it is a resistance to change. It's a thin blue line in a lot of areas. And again, Atlanta is a different city because it's been properly run for so long and we've had success with good chiefs. You have a good chief now, Rodney Bryant. Chief
Great
Bryant
chief,
is going to be outstanding. But what happens in these other cities is you have a mindset that's 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You're in modern times. I keep saying the same thing. Educate black youth on how to deal with the police. That'll give them the opportunity to learn algebra. It'll give them the opportunity to go to the police force, ASVAB tests, military, different options. But as long as we continue to feed all these kids like they're growing up in the neighborhoods we live in or we grew up in, we're doing ourselves a disservice. We're doing African American youth a disservice. We're acting like our whole 15% is part of a 10%. No, the 10% I talk about is 10% of American, I always say 10% because it's a catchy phrase, but it's basically middle class and up African Americans. And African Americans of influence, be you a rapper, athlete, or whatever. We're allowing policies in the status quo to happen that affects the youth that are continuing to be funneled into the penal system. It's not going to change until we correct that.
Say no more. Christy?
I agree that our children and our adults need to be educated on how to interact with law enforcement. I think we need greater education about our legal system, even from elementary school. And I mean, I think I feel like there's this feeling of we are educated on our legal system because we're taught the different judicial offices, which nobody still remembers. But we're not taught what to really expect and anticipate when we go through that system, or if you ever find yourself in that system. In addition to that, like, I feel like there's so many things that need to change that even though you guys are like, okay, well, this is the system as it stands, we got to do this and this within the system. My personal feeling is that the system itself needs to be dismantled, and we need to create new systems that are designed with us in mind, because the current system was not designed. The current system was designed with us in mind as slaves in this system. So until we create a system in which we are participants, where we are human and not slaves in this, and we're not thought of or tried to be implicated as slaves to this system, then we're not going to succeed. Because as long as we keep over-policing each other, as long as we keep imprisoning each other, the entire prison system is a system of slavery. That is its purpose based on the 13th Amendment. So until we acknowledge that, and until we do something about that and start changing the systems from the amendments going forward, we're going to keep having this same conversation. That's my opinion.
Comment?
You're not going to get a multi-billion-dollar system to change for the sake of changing. It has to come from, well, I mean, this is going to sound weird, but if you tailor-made the educational systems, the school systems, for fit the demographics that occur in that individual school system, but what's happening, you got a cookie-cutter system, school system design and blueprint that was designed in white, middle-class America. And you're putting that system and trying to say, bam, it'll work in inner city where the kids go to school because they don't get breakfast. They're on time to school because they want to get breakfast. They stay at school until lunch and then leave after lunch because they want 2 meals, and that may be the only 2 meals they eat that entire day.
And
Those are the
meals
kids
aren't
I'm
even
talking
healthy.
about reaching. I'm not talking about our kids or your kids or my kids. What I'm talking about are the kids that can't fend for themselves, because African Americans, our leaders, religious and otherwise, have allowed a system to create the uncleans. And now we celebrate the uncleans. We're the only race that allow the derelicts in our ethnic group to write and dictate how the rest of us act.
Well, to be fair, I feel like those kids didn't have to be derelicts, because so many of those kids that you're calling the uncleans, well, the men,
No,
the
kids,
people,
not kids.
the men and women that you're referring to as uncleans had potentials when they were in middle school, elementary school, and high school that were overlooked. A lot of those kids have leadership potential in spades, but because they were leading people away from the conformist agenda of the system instead of towards it, those kids were ostracized and pushed out, and that's how they became what you call unclean. But had that same energy been channeled and filtered and shifted and worked with, those kids would be the future leaders, or the leaders that you're looking for today, that would stand up and say, hey, they would be the next Jesse Jackson.
The blueprint's not right. It's not going to happen. If you're using a system, okay, that's like South Africa saying, okay, we're going to tailor apartheid to fit our needs now when it's a black-run country. It's not going to work. And now
because
we have
you're
an
still
educational system.
The system. You got to think outside
exactly,
of this
but my
system.
point is, we have to
And those
custom
kids
make.
act outside of this system.
We have to custom make school systems that fit. Okay, one school system, the English may not be the low scoring. It may be the
You're
maths.
trying
okay,
to change the system by working within it, and I'm saying you have to break down the system in order
that's
to change
my point.
it.
I said that leaders need to set up charter schools. They need to set up.
That's still part of the
vocational
system.
schools.
That's still
Well,
part
you
of
can't
the
do
system.
away with the whole system.
That's what I'm implying, that you need to do away with the whole system.
You can't do that.
Shut down the whole fucking system and start over,
You
ground
socialist,
up,
you.
and rebuild. What? What'd you say? Did you make another Becky comment?
No. I called you socialist.
Wow. No, I'm anarchist.
Chris, you got anything else?
Thank you guys for sending. No, I'm just kidding. No, I really understand your point, and I do understand your perspective, and I really appreciate your thoughts on it. And I'm glad that you were able to entertain mine as graciously as you did, in spite of the couple Becky comments. I'll take that.
I was just joking.
I know. I took it as you meant it.
See, that's a comedian coming out now. That'll be one of her jokes.
No, but I mean, as a current educator, as a college graduate, as a mother too, I've seen various parts. As a former bus driver, I've seen so many different parts of our education system, and our political system, and our legal system. And from my perspective, it's all broken. And until we can actually just acknowledge that it's all broken and stop playing into it and start actually working to fix it, we're going to keep having the same problems, is all I'm trying to say.
MJ.
Closing. In closing, like I always say, it's totally off topic, but if you're involved in any incident involving police, you feel that you're being unfairly treated, call for supervisors to the scene, or make sure you file a complaint, an official complaint, later on in an officer. If you don't file the complaints, if you don't put it out there, it's not going to happen. And I will do what I always do every show. When you were incarcerated, did you feel that you were mistreated?
Yeah.
Did you file a complaint?
No.
Okay, thank you. 100.
He's still batting 100%. Anything closing, Christy? That was your anything closing?
No, just, my name is Christy Gaynell. It's spelled Christ-Y, because that's what my mom was thinking when she had me. Gaynell, Gaynell. And you can find me by that name on all of the social media platforms. And if you actually want to talk to me, have me talk for you, speak for you, discuss anything, I'm always available. So find me, follow me.
What's the name of your book again?
Condoms Are Cheaper Than Child Support.
There it is. So listen, yet another classic conversation. I do believe both of y'all made some dynamic points tonight. You know, the one thing I took from it was, you know, I know we came in here discussing crime, the stats, how the crime has gone up in Atlanta. You know, one of the reasons why I think the mayor is stepping down. But it was an alarming thought process in terms of the education system, you know, that you brought up, Christy, and we wasn't on that topic tonight, but it was such a key point because I think it ties in.
It is.
It ties in so dramatically, you know. I mean, the lack of education and how our system is so. You point out so many points, whether you knew it or not, of how flawed the education system is, you know, from K through, you know, and if we can capture some of that at an early age, the difference it could make, you know, I think, you know, if we could introduce things, even from a law enforcement standpoint, you know, just imagine if you had, I know like my kids' school have a law enforcement class in high school, but just imagine introducing that and making it mandatory. It shouldn't be an elective. It should be a required class. You know, it should be a required class. It should be on the same level. And I think we're dropping the ball so many times on the focus on, you know, the ELA and the math and all this stuff. Things like that should be a requirement, you know, for every school system. I think, you know, race education should be a class in every school system, black and white. It should just be mandatory. Things like the ASVAB, you know what I mean? Whether you want to go in the military or not, but just imagine having the knowledge, you know, vocational stuff, whether you want to go into it or not, having the knowledge. I think we're, you know, we if you want to keep your kids out of that legal system, you got to start with that school system and do a better job at policing our kids at an early age. And I think it can make a dramatic difference in their lives and just give them some kind of introduction. And so, you know, I think we, you know, as a system, we are failing our kids. You know, we're failing them bad. You know, and I personally, I fault, you know, our legal system, our justice department, as well as our education department. And then those, and in the middle, you got those, you know, those, and I put it under quotes, those leaders. You know what I mean? Because they're failing, they're bad. It's just bad. You know what I mean? The political leaders, the religious leaders, you know what I mean? They're dropping the ball on so many things. If we, you know, let's not wait for the next hashtag. Let's not wait for the next shooting to do something. You know what I mean? It should be something that's, like we talked about earlier, you know, you get Morris Brown back. All right, now we got Morris Brown accredited. Now let's go to the Atlanta public system, the Clayton County school system, the DeKalb County school system. Let's find, you know, let's fix that junk. It shouldn't be pushing these kids along. You know what I mean? It shouldn't. We got to get them, man. We got to get them at an early age. And that's the only way we're gonna keep out the legal system. You want to figure out how to stop them from getting that stopping, you know, those arrests. We gotta start here. So, anyway, classic conversations, man. JT and Low. It's been great, y'all, and we out.
And
outstanding.
As always,
Outstanding.
Feel the water flow. This is for the fire in your flow. This is for the fire in your soul. In your soul, your soul, your soul. Soul cleansing. Soul
Everybody
cleansing.
got problems. Everybody got problems. No matter which soul.
Soul cleansing. Soul
That's why we gotta
cleansing.
call them. That's why we gotta call them. My spirit's so asshole.
Soul cleansing. Soul.
Nearly lost my soul, nearly lost my faith. When I lost my brother, that's the day it went away. Mama cried, so did granny did too. So lost, so hurt, I ain't know what to do. So I yell, and I cuss her back God. Like why in the fuck, how could you do that? Bring that pain in my family, it's something we did. Tell me you mad at me, cause I can't deal. And it's hard to live without my brother, and it's hard to forgive, but still I pray.
Feel the water flow. This is for the fire in your soul. We pray for better days to live our lives and make a change. Feel the water flow. This is for the fire in your soul. In your soul, your soul, your soul. Feel the water flow. This is for the fire in your soul. We pray for better days to live our lives and make a change. Feel the water flow. This is for the fire in your soul. In your soul, your soul, your soul.
I ain't know what your life like, but I'm just trying to get my soul right. Been struggling my whole life, in the dark with no sunlight. Tired of making up excuses, going crazy about to lose it. In the midst of all the bullshit, let the music be a pulpit.